As the Crucifixion shows, even deicide, the ultimate wicked act, became the occasion which propelled Logos forward in human history. Not because it was evil, but because God can take that evil and the freedom that enabled it and turn it into a greater good. That is the meaning of human history. And another one done. So this month we read Logos Rising, A History of Ultimate Reality by Dr. E. Michael Jones. And this was a big read, not only because of its size, but of its content. It is a deep dive into philosophy, human history. It's divided into two parts. The first part is the history of Logos, and the second part is the Logos of history. I apologize for my children in the background. John, can you be quiet for a sec? Thank you. I'm pretty sure that Logos is pronounced like Logos, but I've heard Dr. E. Michael Jones say Logos for the longest time, and it's just, I just can't help say it like him. It reminds me a bit of Christopher Dawson's book on medieval history. There's just so much in it that to be able to have put it together probably took a lot of work. Most definitely took a lot of work. So he divides it into two books, into two parts. The first part is the history of Logos, and the second part is the Logos of history. The first part deals with how us human beings have always believed in God and have always tried to seek God or gods, depending on the civilization, the culture, and how atheism doesn't make any sense. He starts off in the beginning by dismantling atheism, and then proceeds to go through the different civilizations, and from antiquity, the Greeks, and how each civilization or groups of people and culture had a part of the truth. So for the Greeks, they had philosophy, and he goes extensively through the different philosophers: Ximenes, Pythagoras, Aristotle, Socrates, etc., and what each of them brought to the table of Logos, how they came about to the reality of God, even though it was an imperfect understanding of God. He talks a bit about the Jews, how their understanding of God was through history and through revelation. St. John's Gospel, the first verse specifically, in the beginning there was Logos, and Logos was with God, and Logos was God, and how that is such a very important one of the most important, or if not the most important thing that has ever been said in human history. Some of the interesting things that, for example, Islam, how Islam came to be. Talks a bit about science and how science couldn't have developed in Islam or in China, or there was some science, but it couldn't develop in the way it did later on in Christian Europe. The Chinese were actually very far behind when it came to science. They had several artifacts from the Islamic world that was brought from the Islamic world. It was just like artifacts, just things. They didn't know how to use it. They had no idea how to use it, and I thought that was very interesting. Hello, it is May. I apologize for being late, but here we are. If you'd like to join me, we are reading The Greatest Philosopher Who Ever Lived by Dr. Peter Kreeft. It is a wonderful book about Mariology. If you've never read anything about Mariology, I gave this to my dad to read, and he absolutely loved it. He didn't convert or anything, but he had a greater understanding of Mary and her role in the Catholic Church. If you're interested, you can sign up in the description below. We have a Telegram group where we share different passages, and at the end of the month we meet up online to talk about the book. So if that interests you, please go ahead and sign up. I'd love to see you. And for now, let's go back to the book review. The second half is called The Logos of History. So the second half deals with how Logos, how our understanding of God affects history, affects us, affects how we act, and God's role in it all, the divine providence. He goes through people like Vico. I had no idea who Giambetti Vico was, and how he saved essentially history and philosophy from from disappearing in the Western world. He talks about Hegel and how he was heavily influenced by Martin Luther. He also goes through the French Revolution and in the Second World War, and he goes through so much. That's why I find it so unbelievable. I've never read anything like this. How our understanding of God or understanding of the world affects how we act, and how God then takes the bad that we do and turns it into good. There are several examples. The German people after the Second World War were affected by, were subdued, morally subdued by the introduction of pornography, and how there was a counter reaction from Catholics like Michael Calmus. Michael Calmus made an association called, I forgot what it is called, it's in German, but it's kind of like the equivalent of the Legion of Decency in America, where they censored certain films or books, etc. And it's fascinating how actually a lot of the people back then were against the moral subversion of their youth. They were so they thought about the youth so much and treasured their innocence and, you know, the freedom of speech. Yes, you can say what you want, but how does that affect the youth and their minds? Ever since St. Augustine explicated the meaning of the Incarnation, we know that time has a direction and a purpose, and that the name of that purpose, as well as the force which makes that purpose happens, is Logos. We know that man's free will allows him to negate that purpose, but no wicked human act, no matter how heinous, not even killing the Logos Incarnate, can thwart God's plan. As the Crucifixion shows, even deicide, the ultimate wicked act, became the occasion which propelled Logos forward in human history. Not because it was evil, but because God can take that evil and the freedom that enabled it and turn it into a greater good. That is the meaning of human history. Every single victory has led to a failure, but every failure has led to another even more unpredictable victory in the upward spiral of Logos, that is the inexorable trajectory of human history. I think that sums this book up. God has a plan. God has allowed us to do what we want, and no matter how the tables are turned, no matter how bad it gets, God always creates good. Many times while I was reading it, I thought, wow, okay, because Vico talks about the cycle of human history, the age of the gods, the age of the heroes, and then the decay at the end. I forgot exactly what it's called, but nothing is new. Every single catastrophe has already come. It's just different, or it just happens to a different set of people or a different culture or a different time, but everything it's bad that's happened has already happened, and it's just we have a choice. Do we let it continue to happen, or if it does continue to happen, do we ask God to bring about good from that evil, instead of losing into despair? And too, I quite like that Dr. Jones put a bit of his story, several stories from his life, how God came to his life and brought about a greater good. He talked a bit about this during our interview, where he lost his job at St. Mary's College, because he thought he would be teaching all his life, and that was the best thing that ever happened to him. And a lot of the times we don't see that. At that, when that bad thing happens, we think it's the worst thing that can ever happen, and we feel lost. But what we don't realize is God is always there, and he's always in charge. It is, despite, all reading about all the crazy things, because Kinsey is in here, Nietzsche is in here. I thought it was interesting how Nietzsche was so influenced by Wagner, but then not just with Nietzsche and Wagner, but every time something was changed or misunderstood, the next generation would go to the next step. Once there was this misunderstanding, it would just keep going to its end, which is atheism. So you have like people like Luther, and then you have Hegel, and then you have the next person, etc., etc. And then you end up with someone like Michel Foucault. Every step would bring you to its end. to its to where it makes sense to end. But just it's the same as well for the other side. So you have Aristotle, but then you have St. Augustine, and then you have Vico, and so on and so forth. In the end, it's a very hopeful book. There's so much more to say about it, but I don't want to keep rambling, but please go ahead and read the book. In every chapter, there's like 100, at least on average 100 citations. That's another reason why I took the time to read the book, because you would just look at Dr. Jones just cites so many people from so many books. But I do encourage you to read Logos Rising. It is such an important book, and I wish everybody knew this book, and wish everybody knew Dr. Emanuel Jones, because he's so underrated in the Catholic sphere. So please go ahead, do read it. If you have read it, let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. And with that, I shall see you in the next one.